what is your primitive brain doing to you around people? I'm Kathy Bartulli, and I'm here with the amazing Rick Wilkes from Thriving Now. I run the Intimacy Dojo, and I help Rick on Thriving Now. And I think this topic is so powerful. I know for years, I'm a really smart person, and I'd be like, oh my God, what came out of my mouth? Why did I say that? Like, it's not what I intended. And I would spend all this time thinking about how I was going to act around people and try to like act kind of cool and together, and something else entirely would happen. It was almost like somebody possessed my body and did something weird, and I'm like, oh my God, maybe I should never leave the house. And it was partly through working with Rick all these years and just clearing a lot of old trauma, reclaiming my primitive brain, that I realized that I was in a fight with my primitive brain. My intellectual cognitive brain had ideas about how I should interact with people, how it would be like adult and fun and playful. And then my primitive brain was like, people are scary. You must stay away, protect yourself, get them away from you. And it was acting in a totally different way. And as Rick and I talk about a lot, our primitive brain has an amazing amount of power. It can help a mom lift a car off a small child. It can overwhelm our ability to think things through or do things logically, because sometimes that actually works and that kept us alive. So we're going to talk about different ways that our primitive brain might hijack us and do some tapping to help you get some more control and freedom around that.
I've been watching a lot of nature videos. I just love traveling the world with people that have timed their visit to show us an aspect of nature that seems to be very unique. And yet I'm noticing this common thread. And because of our work with the primitive brain, one of the things I noticed is, so there was a herd of animals. It probably was, they were horned, deer-like animals. And they were grazing and kind of walking and grazing and walking and grazing and walking. And it was up near the Arctic because the wolves were white. And you saw one of them just put its head up and sniff. And that ripped. I'm pretty darn sure that not everyone caught that whiff, but very quickly, the whole herd was aware of something.
We rely on each other for danger.
Exactly. So last night at a bar, a lounge, the Sly Grog Lounge, a lot of my friends were playing. They weren't professional musicians, but they had all come together to form little bands, and they were going to perform for about 20 minutes each. And I'm sitting there and I'm going, I am really uncomfortable. And yeah, the chair wasn't that uncomfortable. It was kind of moving a little bit. So that kind of probably put me a little bit on edge. And as I remembered about this call today, I'm like, okay, my primitive brain is doing something to me around people. What is it? And I was sitting right next to the act that was going on next.
Oh, so they were anxious.
They weren't trying to show it, but like one of them was using a camera in front of me, and she came and she touched me as she was turning on the recorder. And from that moment, I was feeling unsettled. And once I realized that, oh, my primitive brain is picking up the anxiety in the room. It can be like pheromones. It can be the electrical vibration of anxiety. It can be all kinds of things that over tens of thousands and thousands of years that my body around people, my heart field, my nervous system, my olfactory, my vision is picking up things. So like someone walking in and not finding a chair and being like a little angry, frustrated, I started noticing that too. And this is not my fault. This is not something that's a defect in me. As a sensitive person, my primitive brain needs that function. It's gotten me to this place. And this is part of what brings us together today is that your primitive brain is a part of all these interactions. And there is, like Kathy said, times when we are just reactive. Like there was a reaction I had last night, which was, let's leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to the bathroom because it was kind of away from everyone. And I tapped a little bit. I washed my hands. I tapped again. And I peed and I tapped again. And this is all in like 5 minutes. And I came out and I can find a place for me to be, yes, there's anxiety all around, of course. And I'm okay. But that was a conscious act.
Yeah. And I think the even cooler thing for me is when we understand what's going on with our brain, we can calm it down, we can work with it, we can recognize it. So if you hadn't been able to recognize you were picking it up from someone else, you might have just said, oh, this is a bad place for me, or I shouldn't be here, whatever it is. So it gives us power with ourselves, not over ourselves.
Yeah.
Important distinction. But it also helps us be with other people. So I run events here for intimacy. I run help people learn how to connect with each other, whether it's friendship or dating or if they're in relationships. And the problem is people try to pretend all the time that they're not nervous, just like Rick was next to that band who was pretending to have it all together. The problem is we're very sensitive humans for the most part. Humans can tell when someone's being inauthentic. And if someone comes up to you and asks you out on a date or wants to be closer to you friendship-wise, or you're trying to rekindle your romance in your relationship, if they're hiding or trying to hide the fact they're nervous, we feel that's where it comes off creepy. It comes off as something's off here. I don't know what it is. They're trying to hide something. And I'm picking up nervousness, which makes me think of danger. So, I'm not going to relax with this person. Versus I teach people to say, hey, I'm feeling really awkward asking you this. And I'd like to, could we have a cup of coffee together or something? Owning what's true so that you can help the other person be conscious of where you're coming from. So if their primitive brain is reacting to you, they go, oh, that person's not trying to take me for a ride somewhere or con me. They're just nervous. Okay, I can understand that. So by understanding how the primitive brain works, we're getting power with our own bodies and also power with other people where we can kind of manage that and not be so overwhelmed by other people's feelings.
Mm-hmm. So if you're here live with us, there's a chat underneath the video. And I'd love to hear if you want to take a moment to share or even or reflect, where's a place, a time, or an experience where you feel more unsettled or like not yourself, when from an objective standpoint, it's actually okay. So this isn't a situation like you feel like you're a cat and you're surfing with sharks, or you're a beaver in the desert and there's not a tree anywhere around. I get that there are places where we are really not going to feel at home, but some place where, hey, there's something going on here. I'm being affected.
Yeah. And we just throw a lot of information at you. So, it's okay to take a deep breath and just go, okay, what am I noticing in my body? I think the biggest thing for me was discovering that if I felt uncomfortable, I wasn't actually necessarily in danger. So our primitive brain wants to belong and wants to keep us safe. Its main goal is to keep us safe so we can survive. It's reacting that way. It recognizes danger, and it looks for danger in ways that we may not fit in. We might be physically in danger, and it has the intelligence of a small dog. So if you ever felt very scared in a certain situation, maybe as a 3-year-old, your brain may not have, especially if you were kind of traumatized and you kind of froze, your primitive brain may think you're in danger as an adult in a situation that's totally safe or very safe, but you're still reacting to it. Like if someone raises their voice, and when you were little, it felt like mom or dad was just completely out of control. As an adult, a friend may be feeling emphatic about something, and there's actually they're not dangerous, they're just feeling powerful about something. But we may react as if there's a physical danger, as if we're going to be harmed or excluded from the herd or left to die somewhere, if that makes sense.
It does. Someone wrote to me privately about, can there be more to it than just picking up on someone's energy? And yes, that's what I think Kathy was saying. How we can pick up on someone being in their power, and it can be triggering. And like last night, I was out in public. I wanted to stay and see a couple of the first bands to see my friends. But when I do have a situation like that downstream, I look at, well, did this remind me of anything from my past? And that's a really good question in tapping. If you're in a place where you can allow those things to be revealed in a safe container, then that's what we do in these types of circles. And also, downstream, it's useful to be able to look at what triggers us, and then, what does it remind us of? Who does it remind us of? And someone else wrote, it's not about people, but I just got so triggered having to write an invoice. Well, are you writing an invoice to a rock? And I say that because, like, if I'm writing an invoice, I'm writing it to a person. And there's a whole, like, even though they're not physically there, I'm sensitive enough that I also can make up stories for myself about how they're going to feel about getting this invoice. Mm-hmm. And so there is a relationship often with things because they're going to reach a person. Did that make sense, Kathy?
It absolutely does. Like, all our beliefs about an invoice is saying what I did is worth this much, and I'm asking you to pay me for it. There's our own internal feelings about, was I really worth that much? Do I deserve to charge for this? Are people going to judge me about this? And then there's the feelings about how someone else might receive it. Like, are they going to be angry? Are they going to feel like I cheated them, or any of those things? So sometimes when there's no coherent thoughts around it, that's a really strong signal that our survival brain is in charge. Because our cognitive brain evolved later. And normally, like, if we're in our adult thinking self, we can think about this. When Rick and I, like, whenever a client tells us, this doesn't make any sense, we're like, ooh, now we're at the juicy stuff. That's where your survival brain is like going, I'm going to take control. I'm going to steer this car based on rules that may be really outdated or may not be what you want to, how you want to walk through the world, but you got them embedded very young. I still have trouble sending out it, when someone asks me how much I charge for coaching, even though I've done it now for 10, 11 years. There's still, especially if I've just raised my rate, there's still a little like, oh, like, what is this person going to say? Like, even if I tell them, like, if it's not in your budget, no problem or whatever, but there's like a little bit like, who am I to ask for this much money? Like, the old things come up. Like, am I being generous to myself and others? Do I deserve to be generous to myself? If any of that helps, just realize that if you're not getting cognitive thoughts, it's almost surely your survival or primitive brain that's in charge. And we use the terms survival and primitive brain interchangeably.
Yeah. And it likes to control situations because that's part of what it determines for a lot of people is, how safe am I? And for people that have a lot of tuning, like, am I in control or not in control? Mm-hmm. Sort of black and white. That's a primitive brain thing to me.
Yeah.
It comes from those, lights up those parts of the brain that if I'm not in control, then I'm not safe. If that feels true, if I'm not in control, then I'm not safe. Like for me, I get sort of relaxed and it goes, well, I guess it depends. If I'm sliding on ice in a car, well, yeah, I'm not as safe as I am when I've got traction. But there was a time in my life where if I had said, if I wasn't in control, I'm not safe, that would have been an 8, 9, 10. But those were times when I really was driven by perfectionism and trying to be in control of getting it all right.
Well, I think that's Janet was saying. Janet said in the chat, the awareness of not being in control, and that is, we tend to feel traumatized when we don't have control, when we feel overwhelmed, or when the circumstances in life feel more than we can handle. And realize a lot of times we don't recognize it as trauma because we learned about this powerlessness when we were a child and we're viewing it from an adult's eyes. We remember now, I have my wallet right here. If that person pisses me off, I'll call a Lyft, or I have my car keys, or I'm going to grab my phone. But a 3-year-old doesn't have any of those things. A 3-year-old is a small body. Someone can grab them and make them do things. So we've learned that we often feel powerless, which is a trauma. We feel like we can't control or do anything about it. So we feel overwhelmed. As adults, when we do have control, I use the analogy of an elephant. They train baby elephants by putting a stake in the ground and a cuff on their arm. And when the elephant's a baby, it can't get away. It learns it cannot get away. As an adult elephant, all they need is a very small stake in the ground and a little bit of something around the foot. That elephant can tear it out without even thinking, but it's been trained not to. And a lot of us have been trained to feel powerless about things that we actually have power now. And that's one of the reasons I love tapping so much, is because we can use that to let the survival brain, which is feeling totally powerless, communicate with the intellectual brain and kind of exchange information, so that all of a sudden the survival brain, which is feeling completely helpless, is like, oh, I can pull that stake out of the ground, and if you try to stop me, I'll stomp on you. Gives us a lot more freedom.
And Jean brought up another example, and I think this is really empowering to have a different frame of reference, even if it doesn't shift how we feel. So she said, if I go to the clubhouse for a potluck dinner, I feel very uncomfortable. It reminds me of when I didn't fit in from childhood, and I don't think they're going to want to really know me. And I
want to know you, Jean.
You what?
I want to know Jean.
Yeah, I'm grateful to know her.
Yeah.
And for me, if I tune into when that type of thing happens, so if I walk into a place and there's no one there who knows me, likes me, and welcomes me, I have an initial, there's a pullback, and it's uncomfortable because I've walked into a space where there are people and there's no one that's my tribe. There's no one that's saying, Rick's here. Now, if there's one person, even if it's out of 100, that has that attitude, even softly, well, now there's a part of my primitive brain that goes, okay, it's okay. Now, what do we do with that? And I think that if there's a strong memory child association, then we get that feeling and we're like, oh, I'm not going to fit in. I've got experience of not fitting in. And after the initial impulse of my primitive brain, what I say is, I settle myself into, I don't know who my friends are going to be yet here. Or it's a little softer place. It's a place of, oh, I wonder what this group is going to be like. And yes, it's an active consciousness. And that's part of what I want. Part of one of the messages that I want to get through is, as someone who's tended to myself for not fitting in, being awkward and shy in group situations, and even to this day, walking into environments where I don't necessarily know everyone, or even sometimes know anyone, that the primitive brain is going to do something to me. It doesn't like necessarily jolt me, but it lets me know this is new ground.
Yeah.
And it's awkward, it's uncertain, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's not safe. And that out of a group of 20 people, just by the law of numbers, chances are there's one or two people that might enjoy our humor, might enjoy something that we saw in a nature documentary or a new series on kindness that Jean talked about this morning on Facebook. That the chances are not guaranteed, and that's part of what the primitive brain really likes, or things that are more guaranteed than uncertain. And yeah.
No, I think it's really good. And cheers bar, Norm, that's the idea. But Norm had to keep showing. The first time Norm showed up to the bar, no one knew his name. Like, yeah. I tend to I go into a party and I see the person that has, like, everyone's like, oh, I want to talk to this person. Like, the first 20 times he went to the community or she went to that community, there may not have been that. We get to build that over time. And I always compare myself to the person that's the center of the room and say, well, I'm not that, I should just leave, versus how about I meet 2 or 3 people tonight and then go home, which helps me. So if you don't understand what's freaking you out, that's okay. Can we just do a little tapping for that?
That'd be great.
So take a nice, slow, deep breath. And just let yourself be here now with us. Let the Facebook cats go be Facebook cats. They'll still be there later. You know, if you're worried about your laundry list or whatever, just for right now, come in this warm bubble with these really loving people that are here. And let yourself relax. Notice that the universe has you. Your feet are on the floor maybe, your butt in a chair, you're supported. You don't have to hold yourself up. Just take another nice, slow, deep breath. Wiggle your toes and notice what they feel like. Are they touching socks or floor, or, you know, like, what's the temperature and texture under them? When we feel our feet or feel our toes, we're actually getting present with our entire body. We'll start karate chop. Even though I have no idea what's going on.
Even though I have no idea what's going on.
There's no thoughts there.
There's no clear thoughts there.
It just feels like I'm overreacting again.
It just feels like I'm overreacting again.
I don't like overreacting.
I do not like overreacting.
I bet my primitive brain does not think I'm overreacting.
Good point. I bet my primitive brain does not think I'm overreacting.
Top of that, what if it's just trying to keep me safe?
What if it's just trying to keep me safe?
Eyebrow, and the more I ignore it.
And the more I ignore it.
Side of the eye, the more upset it gets.
The more upset it gets.
Under the eye, hey there, primitive brain.
Hey there, primitive brain.
Under the nose, thank you for caring so much.
Thank you for caring so painfully much.
Chin, it feels overwhelming sometimes.
It feels overwhelming sometimes.
Collarbone, and I bet you have a legitimate reason for trying to get my attention.
And I bet you have a legitimate reason for trying to get my attention.
Under the arm, I'll try to listen a little better.
And I will try to listen a little bit better.
Top of that, I'm curious what you want to share.
I'm curious what you want to share.
Take a nice, slow, deep breath. When we resist something, it makes it harder to go. Like, we're blaming ourselves, feeling overreacting. Overreacting is a judgment. And I do it to myself too. I'm not picking at anyone. But I have fingers pointing back at me.
And people will tell you that we're overreacting too.
All the time, because they don't want to deal with it or they don't understand it. But like Rick gives a great analogy, is a little kid. If a little kid has to pee, it will like tug on our shirt or whatever, like, hey, I've got to pee. And then it's going to the little kid's going to get louder and louder, like, hey, I have to pee. And then, you know, like, it's yelling or crying, and then it's peeing on the floor. And we're like, why did you do that? When we're not listening, we're not tuned in, and we don't have a good connection with our survival brain, it can feel really ignored. So if you were in a room full of people and you see a fire and you're like, hey guys, there's a fire over here, we should do something, and no one responds, it's going to be terrifying. Mm-hmm. And that's the, you know, our primitive brain is like, hey, there's danger here. I know this can be harming. I've experienced this. And we're ignoring it and telling it to just shut up. It feels really overwhelming. So I find for myself, thanking my primitive brain and trying to listen to it. Like, when do we know what's our experience? Asking it to share the experience and kind of tuning in, then maybe doing some tapping and thanking it and saying, wow, it's so important that you noticed that. I really appreciate you. And when that happened, the circumstances were different in these ways, and it's okay to relax now.
And the word overreacting, I think there's also a truth in it. Like, I can tell now the difference between when I'm reacting and when I'm responding. Mm-hmm. I'm a really good responder. And if I'm in reaction, I can have really powerfully right reactions. And that's where it's like, who is this guy who is so upset and not resourceful? And even if that happens rarely, it's unsettling because it's a reaction and it like overwhelms my nervous system. And that's, I think that there is wisdom if it's not judgmental, if we can take the sharp whips, the follow-up whipping and chaining, if we take that out of the picture, it's like, oh, that was a reaction. It overwhelmed my system, my capacity to be who I want to be. And I don't mean the perfect person, but like human and present, right? If you want to run and fight, or you did, there's a difference if I leave a place like I did last night out of running away,
or choosing.
I'm glad I do, if that's what's needed for my self-care. And if I choose, like, my response to like the light and the crowdedness last night after I saw what I wanted was to leave. But that was a response to tending to my body versus a reaction. And I just love the idea that more and more we can be working with our primitive brain, letting it give us signals, and having a pause, a gap, where we can be in response.
Yeah. That's really
I want that to be part of our lexicon too. It's like, oh, I had a reaction, like triggered for, like, sometimes it does feel like triggered, but like, I like the term, oh, I had a reaction when that happened. And it wasn't the type of thing that I'm tending to myself so that I can be more responsive and present.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot going on in our primitive brain. Its basic fundamental charter, so to speak, is to keep us safe. It may have beliefs that aren't useful, and I think it's useful to notice that if you have a pattern of either feeling so hungry you want to grab people, like you want to enmesh really quickly, or you want to avoid people, that's probably something in your primitive brain. Like, we all get hungry sometimes. We all have dry spells, so to speak, where we're just not running into the kind of people that really feed us or fulfill us from the interaction. But if we're really hungry, or we've just not learned how to connect with people, we can be really like, oh, I need this person. This person kind of it meets my needs, and I want to pull them close really fast. Even if our cognitive brain is like, we don't know them that well, maybe it's better to take this a little slower. There could be something from our primitive brain going, if we don't grab this person now, there's not enough, the scarcity mentality. And that can make other people feel uncomfortable. And it can also get us into friendships. I've done this in the past where I ended up like in a friendship and a flow that wasn't good for me. Like, they were like expecting things that that weren't good. They didn't have good boundaries, or I didn't have good boundaries. But the other side of that is we might be avoiding people. We might be making excuses to never let anyone close, or we might be subconsciously pushing them away, either with awkwardness, or it's kind of a tricky thing. Our brains are pretty smart. We can appear to want to go too fast as a way to push people away. Like, if I'm like, oh, you're dreamy, let's get together, and the other person's like, then we can blame that other person for not bonding. It's not us, it's them. They weren't brave enough. Versus, did I really give them a chance to know me? Am I kind of like paying attention to their signals and what they need too? So if you just the two different sides of our primitive brain will try sometimes to protect us by pushing people away or going too fast. And it just isn't very balanced, and it doesn't let people get to know us as we are.
So let's each do a check-in in your being. What are you needing? Maybe a little sip of water. And yeah, trauma. We can think, Kathy. I think you pointed to this too. Are a situation where even one of those experiences would be more than enough to get us to be healthy, wanting to be safer, to back off. But 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a short time, when we're away from home, we don't have our support network in place, those tend to be very impactful. Kathy and I did a presentation on trauma in the primitive brain, thrivingnow.com/brain. It's free. If you are hearing this and you're wondering about the mechanisms that lock these types of things in, I encourage you to look at that. And for tapping, it can be helpful at thrivingnow.com/inner tapping as one word. Kathy and I talk about a way that you could go back in time and tap with the you that was vulnerable and unsupported and away from home and being assaulted. There are some approaches that you can use on your own. It also is good with a friend or a professional as well. Because I know for me that experiences with men in my teenage years stuck around with me for decades, and I didn't even realize how much it was impacting how comfortable I was. There were smells, or men that were taller than I was were creating a reaction in me. And one that was profoundly important. It was saying, I don't ever want to have that happen again. So what do I have to do? How small or protected or bubbled do I need to be to make sure that doesn't happen again? Yeah. And the healing process opened up some things for me so that I could see more clearly, be tending to my safety while also being engaging with people. And as you said, Kathy, there are people that are really legitimately unsafe, that have terrible boundaries, that are very entitled, that are predators. They look, of all shapes, sizes, colors, genders, and they exist, and they're a fraction of the human race. And what I don't want to do for me is live in a place where I've generalized that to everyone, or to even everyone but my 1 or 2 closest friends, because walking in that space, I know, can be really uncomfortable. It has an impact on the heart and the health. And it's not always just tap, 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 and it's gone and recalibrated. These are big deals that can impact us. So if you are wanting some next steps for you, Kathy and I read all the messages that come to support at thrivingnow.com. And I do try to give at least a tip or a direction or some possibilities. So feel free to reach out to us that way.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to
work with someone else, or do you want to talk a little more about this?
You pronounce it Herminia?
Yes. Yes. Hi.
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 And you're calling from?
From Amsterdam. And my English is not so good. I have to do my best.
Yeah, and if you could speak up just a little bit louder, your microphone isn't picking up things very clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little better.
Yeah.
A little bit. Yeah.
So I've been listening to your things and everything about Krista, but I experienced the same thing, but in a micro thing. So it doesn't have to be so obvious.
Mm-hmm.
So the predators are all over the place. I think I have picked up the anxiety of my mother's anxiety, and I project that into the whole world. So I see monsters all over the places. You understand what I'm saying?
Sure. Do you want to tap on that a little bit?
So yes, just 1 minute. My big problem now is my manager. So my manager is he has this he's autism. He has autism.
He has autism. He's on the autistic spectrum.
Can't relate with emotions, and I'm having a hard time with him because I feel very unsafe. And so that is my big problem: how to deal with my own jail. I feel like I'm in a jail.
Yeah.
I can't make connection, and I see him as a big thing, and I'm a little thing. So,
yeah, I do. Thank you. Because I'm having to really focus and strain. What I'd like to do is, I've taken in what you've said, and I'm going to try to come close to what we know about this dynamic. But I'm going to work with Kathy on it so that I can, so that other people will be able to hear us as well. Kathy, is that okay for you?
That's great.
Yeah. So, like picking up from our parent, oh, people are monstrous, or we have to be vigilant, and we see them as monsters. The first approach that I use is to accept that there's kind of a primal wisdom. We pick up things from our parents, right? So it can be like, even though my mother taught me that everyone's a monster.
That everyone's a monster.
It's a rare thing that a human isn't a monster.
It's a rare thing that a human isn't a monster.
And you have to be vigilant all the time.
You have to be vigilant all the time.
And it made me feel so small.
It made me feel so small.
And powerless.
And powerless.
And I've kept that with me my whole life.
And I have kept that with me my whole life.
Top of the head. My mother taught me to be vigilant.
My mother taught me to be vigilant.
Eyebrow, to be scared of people.
Be scared of people.
Side of the eye, to always be on guard.
To always be on guard.
Under the eye. Against everyone.
Against everyone.
And those, especially people that are different.
Especially people that are different.
And almost everyone's different.
And almost everyone is different.
Hold on, I'm really in a bind here.
I really am in a bind here.
My boss is different.
My boss is different.
And can't do anything about it.
I can't do anything about it.
Top of that. Hey, primitive brain.
Hey, primitive brain.
We don't have to feel small here.
We do not have to feel small here. That felt good to me because I do. Like, I feel like I want to be small to protect me, protect the other person from becoming a monster, but often that doesn't serve either of us. It makes the other person feel uncomfortable because they can tell we're uncomfortable. And I know that I don't have a lot of experience with people that are autistic, but the few that I have interacted with, if I was calm and grounded, it seemed like it was easier for them.
Yeah. Would you lead us in we only have a couple minutes left, and I'd love for you to lead us in because you have a real grace around these dynamics and kind of regrounding, even though they can be felt, they're real, they activate us. Then what? Then what do we do?
Yeah. So nice, slow, deep breath. Karate chop. Even though sometimes this just feels weird.
Even though sometimes this just feels weird.
I feel like I don't have control of how I interact with other people.
I feel like I don't have control over how I interact with other people.
I don't even have control how I interact with myself.
I don't even have control over how I interact with myself sometimes.
And when I fight it, it just makes it worse.
And when I fight it, it just makes it worse.
What if I just took a nice slow deep breath?
What if I took a slow, deep breath
And I'm just with these feelings.
and I'm just with these feelings?
Top of the head, they feel pretty chaotic.
They feel pretty chaotic.
Eyebrow, I don't know if I should go out in public some days.
I don't know if I should go out in public some days.
Side of the eye, and we all feel this way sometimes.
And we all feel this way sometimes.
Under the eye, people just look pretty together from the outside.
People all look so put together from the outside.
Under the nose, but from the inside, we're kind of messy.
From the inside, we're kind of messy.
Chin, and I'm doing nice things by tapping.
And I am doing nice things by tapping.
Collarbone, I'm creating more resilience in my body.
I am creating more resilience in my body right now.
Under the arm, I'm teaching my primitive brain how to calm down.
I'm teaching my primitive brain how to calm down.
Top of the head, and forming a better link between my primitive brain and my cognitive brain.
And forming a better link between my primitive brain and my cognitive brain.
Eyebrow, that's a gift to me.
That's a gift to me.
Side of the eye, and a gift to others.
And a gift to others.
Under the eye, because when I'm more grounded and calm.
Because when I am more grounded and calm.
Under the nose, so are they.
So are they. Or at least it's possible.
Yeah, chin. I'm really proud of the efforts I'm making.
I am really proud of the efforts I'm making.
Collarbone, and my courage to show up.
And my courage to show up.
Under the arm, and face some really uncomfortable things.
And face some really uncomfortable things.
Top of the head, I kind of rock.
I kind of rock.
And I'm going to try to remember that when I walk through the world.
And I'm going to try to remember that when I walk through the world.
Nice, slow, deep breath.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank
Yeah.
you all.
Appreciate you showing up. This is tough stuff sometimes, and I think that I had this vision when I was growing up that I would get it perfect. And even once I found tapping, I thought I would tap enough that none of this would be scary anymore, and it'd be all smooth and graceful. And maybe you'll get there, but I never have. All that's happened, and it's such an amazing thing. It's a miracle to me. Is I've gotten really comfortable with the fact that I'm awkward sometimes and that other people are awkward sometimes. And while it may seem like a small thing, and I'm not going to be like the people I see on TV who had someone write a script for them. They got to practice it 30 times. They got to do retakes. That's what I compare myself to most of the time. Like, oh God, I'm so awkward. But when we allow ourselves to be awkward, when we can accept ourselves there and we can accept other people there, that's a grace we offer people. And it's a different way to connect and be in the world. It lets people be genuine. It lets people risk things. They're willing to try things out and be silly, or like, oh, that so didn't work. I don't think I'll do that again. Or that so didn't work. How can I do that again? It just creates a space where you can be more self-expressed and intimate and connected. And that's just a beautiful, beautiful gift to give the world. So I want to just honor you all for showing up and looking at this and tapping along. And yeah, just this is a gift to me to be able to be with all of you. So, and I love being here with Rick. I love all that he brings. So thank you all very much.
Mm-hmm. Until next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.